Okay, part one. Before we get started with part one, I just want to sort of give you an idea of what the point of part one is. Uh, and actually, really, this whole week is I want you to learn about what transmedia storytelling is. You're going to complete an assignment in which you identify some transmedia storytelling that exists in the world and talk about why you think it's transmedia and how it works and why it works that way. And then one of the things I want to talk about in this first part is differentiating sort of two different types, two different ways of thinking about transmedia, conceptual and operational. So I'll get into that, but sort of two different approaches to answering the question, like, what is transmedia? So part one, what is transmedia? Transmedia storytelling is really storytelling that relies on audience participation. It takes place across various media and platforms. It often involves one universe, but many stories, and it can vary in its purpose. It exists for different reasons. It can be telling nonfiction, it can be telling a fictional story, it can exist to entertain, it can exist to educate. So there's many different reasons why you might tell transmedia stories. But the big thing to keep in mind here with transmedia storytelling is that it's really storytelling that's made possible by digital media because of the connectivity of the web that underlies that digital media. So because we can talk to each other across the world on the internet, and we can present and share media to each other from anywhere, on the web, this is really like why transmedia storytelling has come into existence. It's something that really wasn't as possible without the connectivity of the web and its ability to share digital media and connect people and help people interact with each other as they interact with media. So when we say that it relies on audience participation, what we're talking about is this idea that sort of non-transmedia, traditional media, 100 years ago, newspapers, books, those are things that are author-driven. They're all about an author presenting something to an audience who is simply consuming that something. That is all they can do. 100 years ago, a newspaper gets published in the morning, it gets distributed, some guy picks one up and reads it. All he can do is consume. There's no way for him to interact with that newspaper content or even the author of the newspaper, except maybe, I guess, you could write a letter to the editor or the author. Author-driven works from the sort of old style of media are pre-written. They're really just all about the audience viewing, whether they're reading or watching, and there's no feedback loop. So the author comes up with their story, they put it into some fixed format, and they distribute it to the world, and that's what the world gets. Transmedia is audience driven. It's participatory, just like design thinking. It invites people to be a part of the process of telling the story and to be involved in the story itself. It's all about co-creation, the author helping the audience to create the story together. It's about the audience experiencing the story, and there's feedback loops built in. It takes place across various media and platforms. And really quickly, I just wanted to define what a platform is, because I feel like it's a word that we say a lot in the tech world, but we don't do a lot to, educate people on what it means. You just hear the word platform a lot. Well, what does it really mean? A platform is a technology that others can build and distribute on. So you might think about it as being kind of like two different kinds, a media platform or a software platform. A media platform would be, for example, Twitter. It's a technology, and anyone can create and distribute tweets on it. So anyone can write tweets, can upload photos and share them, can make stories or whatever they're called on Twitter. I cannot keep half of these. Everyone copies each other in social media, and I forget who calls what. But anyone can make content on the Twitter platform and share it with other people. It's not just Twitter that has made technology, and only the people at Twitter can use the technology to make things and distribute things. So it's a platform. Twitter does have its own aspects to its own platform, right? The people who created Twitter also can publish on it like everyone else, but they also have special programs like their ad program that is possible through Twitter being a platform in the first place, right? The people who coded Twitter are probably not really the people who coded the ads platform. Someone comes in on some other completely different branch of the Twitter organization and says, we need ads. They figure out how to put ads on Twitter. Apps, for example, Hootsuite can post to Twitter, can use it, can integrate with Twitter in order to extend the functionality of Twitter. So media platform, Twitter. Software platform might be more like the Apple App Store. Apple creates an iPhone, a device like this. They put their own apps on it. They built the whole thing so they can do whatever they want, but they also have a platform, the Apple Store, where anyone can make apps and release those apps and they'll work on the iPhone. So a platform is just a technology that is built in such a way that others who don't own the technology can build and distribute on it. So that's what we mean by a platform. And so transmedia stories take place across various media and platforms. You might have mobile-specific media and platforms like augmented reality apps, other kinds of apps. You might use print materials like printed books, graphic novels. You might use the digitized versions of those like e-texts. Websites play a big role in transmedia. Existing sites, blogs, images. Transmedia storytellers might make sort of fake sites where the site is kind of presented as if it was the site of someone in the story, who that person doesn't really exist, but the site looks like they made the site or own the site. And it might even extend into physical locations. So having real printed flyers or handouts, actors who show up places and act out parts of the stories. Anything that sort of tells the story, whether it's in the physical world or online, can be used to tell the story and can be used in different combinations. Transmedia stories typically are one universe, but many stories. So Star Wars, of course, the example everybody knows for something like this. There's one Star Wars universe, or like Marvel Extended Universe. It's one universe. The characters all exist in the same universe, and there's many different stories that are told in many different mediums. So transmedia stories, they tend to be one universe with many stories being told inside of it. The Mandalorian tells the story of the Mandalorian. The rest of Star Wars still exists in his universe. He doesn't come across most of the people in it, but he does come across some. Alternate reality games are like a game format, a game form of transmedia. There's usually one story and it's broken up across media with different game elements, but maybe not necessarily focuses that much on there being many different stories. It's like one story, but it's a game, so it's kind of broken into sub-stories. And then cross-media stories, another word you'll come across in your readings, stories that are designed with interaction and co-development between the reader and author. So stories that invite the audience to participate, but might not necessarily be as big as a universe with tons of stories. Might be more kind of smaller. It's maybe one story, but people are invited to participate in it. And then transmedia stories are used for various purposes, right? So you'll see them in marketing. You see them in examples like I Love Bees, which was a marketing piece for Halo 2. It was actually a game. Halo 2 was a game, so I Love Bees was a transmedia game. They exist for their own purposes, right? Artists create these for the enjoyment of making them. Lonely Girl 15, which was a YouTube channel created by filmmakers, they made it because they're filmmakers and they like to make stories. You see publishing organizations being interested in transmedia storytelling and even creating books and other story formats that they can kind of keep under their publishing arm that are transmedia in nature. So transmedia storytelling has these 4 aspects to it, relies on audience participation, takes place across various media and platforms, often involves one universe but many stories, although that can be more on the side of one universe or more on the side of one story, but many different ways to interact with it. And they, of course, vary in purpose. So I will see you again in part 2.